The way he took it was incredible. He was a very, very tough guy.
I think I've only seen Mohammed cry once.
I think he got a sense of his own mortality.
Most people were, I think, a little too scared, so I presume he's a very brave man.
He must have thought, I'm going to get a great story out of it.
In 1985, many of the West's most popular musicians came together for Live Aid, simultaneous charity concerts in the UK and America. They're estimated to have raised more than $200 million towards relieving a devastating famine in Ethiopia and helped save some 2 million lives. These images were the inspiration. They were captured by Mohamed Amin, described as Africa's greatest photojournalist. The coverage won Mo, as he became known, numerous awards. But no sooner had the applause died down than he was back on the road, on his relentless quest for a scoop and to outdo his rivals.
Journalism is a Darwinian vocation. Only the fittest actually survive. And Mohamed Amin, he knew how to survive. He knew he was really the fittest.
I think he was brilliant, he was genius. But you always say, no, that genius people have got some fault. There was some fault in him.
People thought he was the guy who knows it all. People thought he was a guy who would always try and dodge paying this or paying that, right? I came across very many people who said to me, how did you manage to work with him? And my answer back is, I would have gone through 10 years of media school. I would never have picked up what I picked up from him.
Ethiopia had been the scene of the biggest story of Mo's career. In 1991 came another assignment to the country that was again to change his life. It took him to the capital, Addis Ababa, where a coalition of rebel groups was about to overthrow the country's ruler, Mengistu Haile Mariam. Mo rode into town on the rebels' leading tank, filming the joy that followed Mengistu's fall. As always, he was determined to be the very first cameraman with the story, whatever it took.
There was only a couple of them there. It was him for Viz News, Gary Stryker for CNN. Now, they were all filming, but they couldn't get the material out. Dad organized for a plane to come in from Nairobi with Michael Burke and Colin Blade of the BBC. So when this plane came in and these guys got off, he gave his stuff to the pilot. And Gary came along and also gave his package to the pilot. Dad threw his tapes out of the plane and said, you know, this is my plane. Nobody else gets their material out. And so he was ruthless when it came to the field.
But while Mo once again got his scoop, this Ethiopian assignment was to have terrible consequences for him and his crew. In the early hours of June the 4th, a massive explosion lit up the sky above Addis. Mo filmed the blast from his hotel balcony. And after dawn broke, the team set off to discover its cause. They came upon a massive ammunition dump that had been left behind by the Mengistu regime. But then soundman 34-year-old John Mathai was killed instantly in the blast. Mo had been walking beside him. His left arm was ripped to shreds and his life was in the balance.
Obviously the city was at siege. It was a city at war. So the medical facilities were almost non-existent. He was taken into the local hospital there. He was stabilized a little bit, given a drip, but there was not any care that would have helped him survive. I think he would have died had they not been able to get him out of Ethiopia and back to Nairobi.
He came at night and he was admitted to hospital, Nairobi hospital, and he was operated and he lost his arm.
And then, again, the irony is, 2 days later, he asked for all his mail to be sent to the hospital. Without his arm, the other one still bandaged, and all sorts of other injuries. You walk into his hospital room and he's there with his mail, going through his mail, dictating letters to his secretary and...
He was hospitalized for, I think, 2-3 days. Then after that, he just came to the office and started working. He was also driving. He came from the hospital driving a Land Cruiser with one arm.
The way he took it was incredible. I mean, no ordinary man can take it. He was a very, very tough guy.
When I had my accident, I was advised by my friends, family, relatives that, you know, you've done your bit and it's time to slow down. It's time to take a break. You know, you don't need anything. I mean, I'm wealthy enough to pay my bills and to live in the same style as I live at the moment, which is not much of a life because I spend most of my life in the office. That I could do all that, but I don't. I'm not interested. I mean, I lost my arm, and I immediately, when I got out of the hospital, I tried and get back to the work that I love.
Mo's determination to get back to the work he loved took him to a clinic in Ohio, America, where work was being done on battery-operated prosthetic limbs. No sooner had an arm been made for him than he was practicing how to operate his camera. Within 3 months of having the arm fitted, he was again working as a news cameraman. He was now as famous as many of the dignitaries he filmed.
How are you? How are you? I'm very well.
Nice to see you.
Good to see you too, sir.
You're fitting well now.
I'm fitting well. I've got a new arm now, and I can sort of...
How mobile is it?
It's fairly mobile, and I can rotate my wrist in either direction in the right ground.
Well, it's nice to see you back. I hope you're not making it too hard for you.
Thank you very much. I can grip as I like. See? Okay, you put your hand in there. Okay. Okay. Is it hard?
Oh, it's hard.
Does it hurt?
Oh, yes, it's okay.
So what do you want me to do? I can't release now.
He could press buttons and the arm moved around and he could still use it. To me, his sense of humor extended even to that. He was coming to show me his artificial arm, and he was showing me a new toy. The way a child is very proud of his new toy, he was so proud of his arm.
He was a bit mischievous about this. In fact, he told me that once he had gone into his bank in London with a cheque, and he held the cheque in his hand and put it through the thing to the young lady teller, and then spun the cheque round, whereupon the teller fainted. And Mohammed was a bit taken aback by this and had to apologise to the young lady and to the bank manager.
Getting back to work involved Mo in a range of ventures. After the loss of his arm, he chose increasingly to concentrate on still photography and on showcasing the beauty of the continent he loved.
He was best known for his coverage of hard news, which, you know, traditionally is bad news, famines, wars, coups, dictators. But that was not the Africa that he loved. It was not the Africa that he knew. He wanted to show the positive side of the continent, the positive stories. So he did two things. One is he published over 75 coffee table books on the beauty, people, culture, flora and fauna of this continent. The second thing that it did is founded a show called Africa Journal.
The next crucial thing, and in fact the most important thing, is do we actually have a program? And that's where all of you come into that we are going to have to put in a lot of effort to try and get the program not only off the ground, but actually to sustain it once we're up and running.
Hello and welcome to Africa Journal.
18 years on, the show's mix of news, culture, sport and innovations has audiences all over the continent. Another event that took Mo away from his hard news beat was the Safari Rally, an annual road race through some of Kenya's toughest terrain. Perhaps not surprisingly, the event's speed and competitiveness drew him. It was also a rare occasion for family time, for his son Salim loved to come too. Like most of the drivers, Mo checked out the route on a practice run before the race began. It was an extra chance for him to get the best pictures possible.
Mohammed came to my desk and said, "What do you think of those?" And I looked at these pictures and I said, "These are wonderful." And they were. They were wonderful pictures. They showed the cars with dust flying everywhere and elephants in the background with their ears flapping and their trunks up in the air and whatnot. And they were tremendous. I said, "They're fantastic, Mohammed, fantastic. Now tell me when you took them, because you didn't take them today." And he looked at me and said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Because the thing is just flagged off. The route is nowhere near any elephants. So when did you take them?" So rather shamefaced, he said, does that mean you're not going to use them?" I said, "Of course I'm going to use them, but I'm just not going to say in the caption that they were taken today." And we did use them. We used them right across the front page and it gave our front page tremendous impact.
Despite Mo's brave face, the loss of his arm had a profound effect on him. And though he hid his suffering, the wound was extremely painful.
I think if it had been like a huge scar somewhere that you could show off and say, you know what, I've been through the wars and here I am. But losing an arm, I think was a bit too much. And many people will say this. It made him a bit more angry, I think. Maybe a bit more determined.
He was getting frustrated because he didn't have the arm But he was not showing it at all. He just didn't want to leave his work. He wanted to carry on what he was doing.
After he lost his arm, I think he got a sense of his own mortality. I think he thought he was immortal before the explosion in Ethiopia. He thought he was never going to die because he had survived so much that I think he really did think he was immortal. He was not going to die.
A couple of years later, there was another reminder that life does not go on forever. 4 journalists, all well known to Mo, were stoned and beaten to death in the Somali capital, Mogadishu. They were British-American photographer Dan Eldon, Kenyans Anthony Macharia and Hos Minor, and Hansi Kraus from Germany.
I think I've only seen Mohammed cry once, and that was in '93, when our friends were killed in Somalia. And he came up to me and he said, you know what, there's been an accident in Somalia, and I think these guys have been killed. That's the one time I saw him with tears in his eyes. So yes, I think he was afraid of something.
Dan will never be forgotten by those.
At a memorial service for Dan Eldon, Mo paid tribute to his colleague.
Sound, sound the clarion, fill the five, throughout the sensual world proclaim, one crowded hour of glorious life is worth an age without a name.
Little could Mo have imagined that his own end was so near. A year later, however, there was cause for celebration. The marriage of Salim to his long-standing girlfriend, Fazana. When the festivities kicked off, Mo was, as so often, away on a job.
He wasn't in town, and actually we didn't quite know when he was arriving. While all the music and dancing and everything was going on, all of a sudden, sort of out of the darkness, emerged these suitcases, followed by this figure with his sleeve tucked into his blazer and kind of wandering in, completely bewildered as to what are all these people doing in my house, why is there music and dancing, and then it dawning on him that, oh yeah, my son's getting married. I don't think he quite understood the concept of having fun and dancing and things like that. It was completely alien to him. It just wasn't something that he had ever done, and I don't think he was very interested in it, didn't know how to react. He lasted about 10 seconds and then he left. I think he was lonely in the sense that he was so used to his own company that I don't think he was very comfortable around a lot of people. He had a lot of acquaintances, he knew a lot of people, but he hadn't made many great friends in his life.
Within 2 years of the wedding, Salim and Fazana were looking forward to the birth of their first baby. But Mo was not to see his grandchild. On Saturday, November the 23rd, 1996, he and journalist and business colleague Brian Tetley were at Addis Ababa International Airport on their way home from a business trip. They checked in on Ethiopian Airlines flight ET961 to Nairobi. Mo, who published the airline's in-flight magazine, sat in first class. Brian was in business. But the flight was not to reach its destination.
I asked Salim, I said, is your dad already back? He hasn't called us. So he said, no, Mom, he hasn't called me also. And then I came home And one of Salim's friend, he tells me that the Ethiopian airline, which was coming from Addis to Nairobi, has been hijacked and crashed in Comoro Islands. Then I opened the television, and it was in the television.
That's it. That's it. Oh, shit.
The plane had been taken over by 3 Ethiopians seeking political asylum and crashed when it ran out of fuel. Mo was apparently trying to negotiate with the hijackers and thwart their plans before the plane hit the water.
I saw Mohamed Amin come out twice the cabin to the passenger compartment in economy class and talk to some of us to try to assist him or to stand up against the hijackers, but most people were, I think, a little too scared, so I presume he's a very brave man.
He was that sort of a person because he must have thought that if I survive, I'm going to get a great story out of it. Great story out of it if he will survive.
In the immediate aftermath of the disaster, it was unclear how many of the 175 passengers and crew on board were alive.
Still, we had very much hope because always in this sort of situation, always Amin comes out.
Reuters then arranged the charter of a flight from Wilson Airport to the Comoros. And we kept listening in and hearing updates throughout that flight. It was a long flight. It was 5.5 hours. It was a long flight in a small plane. And I thought, okay, things are good, because if they are survivors, the chances are he would be amongst them. But it wasn't to be.
In a career spanning 4 decades, Mo had covered almost every major news story in Africa. He'd risked his life, won awards, and moved the world. Aged just 53, he was one of 125 people who died in the plane crash, including the hijackers. But though his days of making news himself were at an end, his contribution to journalism was far from over.
Underneath that, we're actually changing all the way to
In 1998, the Mohamed Amin Foundation was established. Its key element, a television and film school, better known as MoForce.
One of the things that he always wanted to do in his life was to set up a training school that would be a center of technical excellence for African journalists. He felt that African journalism got a raw deal from the rest of the world. And one of the main things that people criticized was the technical quality of the work that African journalists produced. And we got an opportunity to set it up after he died. And so far, almost 200 students have graduated from the foundation, and many have gone on to become really, really good in their fields.
And you guessed it, he's from Kenya, Peter Mumirimi, Kenya.
Peter Murimi, now an independent filmmaker, graduated from the school in 2001. 3 years later, he won the CNN African Journalist of the Year award for his very first documentary.
It has everything to do with Mohamed. Because of the school, there are a number of people right now who are very passionate about this continent, who are passionate about the news. And I think through us trying to tell the African story, the African way, this is his legacy, like it's living right now.
CameraPix, the company Mo launched, has also continued to grow and has now expanded to include A24 Media. The archive he founded is the largest resource of its kind in Africa. With 4 million still images and 8,000 hours of film and video footage, it charts the history of the continent from the 1960s. At the helm of the company today is Salim Amin, who works from the desk that was once his father's.
My whole office is like a museum to him. We have a cross given by Pope John Paul II to him. We have Idi Amin's epaulets, as well as the eagle that used to sit in Idi Amin's living room. I have obviously a lot of his awards. I've even got his arm, you know, one of his arms, that he had 2 false arms. One was the one that he used most of the time, the other was a spare. So I have one of them in my office. The second arm is in the Frontline Club in London. That forms part of their displays. So yeah, we have, I mean, it really is a bit of a museum and for me a source of constant inspiration.
I walk into here and I look at all the stuff around here, the photos, all his various awards and certificates and everything. I miss talking to him. Yeah. I miss talking to him because he was like a father, somebody who brought you up and actually managed to bring out almost, I would say, almost the better side of me.
I felt very bad that I have lost him. When we were together, I mean, he gave me a heaven. He gave me everything.
He died too young, of course, but the way in which he died, arguing with the hijackers at the cockpit, trying to resolve the situation as the plane plunges into the ocean, I think myself and I think we thought it was written. It was the final scene of the screenplay of Mohammed's life.
He would have wanted to go that way probably, at the center of the biggest news story of the day, headline news, front page of every paper. You know, he would have wanted to go out that way if he had been able to choose.